Welcome to Florida Internet and Television's FiTV, the show that brings you the latest in internet and television content, technology, and connects you with Florida politics. FiTV is presented to you by Florida Internet and Television, whose members connect millions of Floridians to the things they love, the needs they have, and the work they do. And now, here's your host, Brad Swanson.
February is Black History Month, and we recently hosted several African American leaders from throughout Florida to reflect on and share their perspectives on the richness of Black history in America. Our first guest is Marva Johnson, Regional Vice President for State Government Affairs for Charter Communications. She points to an icon of Florida politics as one of her inspirations.
And she didn't even know that she inspired me. It was a tangential relationship, but Senator Arthenia Joyner, Minority Leader Arthenia Joyner, because you never know the impact you make on people that you don't see day to day. But just to know that in the community that I grew up in, there was someone who looked like me, who had already broken the glass ceiling and had already cracked the barrier by entering law school and passing the bar and having a successful legal practice, and knowing that she had paved the way for people like me to follow in her footsteps was tremendous. I joke with her from time to time. I tell her that she dressed me even before she knew me, because I would watch her stepdaughters come to school, and they were always so well put together. They were very articulate and very smart girls, and definitely girls to keep your eye on. And it was, I'm sure, because of her leadership in the home that they presented so well. And so even before I met her, she was an influence in my life.
Well, Senator Joyner's amazing. That's probably not a small club, in not just in the Tampa Bay area, but across the state of Florida, of young women that looked to Senator Joyner for that kind of leadership. That's amazing.
We're grateful for her example.
All right, well, let's look at a broader scale. Obviously, in this month, Martin Luther King Jr. is the pinnacle of who is recognized, but there were so many others. Was there another national figure that inspired you as you were growing up?
It's interesting because Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was certainly a perspective in the political sphere and also in the social change sphere, but there were other voices that were more personal to me that made me enjoy being who I was every day. Mm-hmm. And one of those voices was Maya Angelou. Mm-hmm. And just to read her poetry and to be inspired and to find a sense of pride in who I was through her poetry was exceptional. She had one poem that was a tribute to African American women, in that we didn't fit the traditional standards for beauty. And she spoke about how the things that traditionally were not considered beautiful, like full lips and round bottoms, perhaps, were suddenly things that she showed pride in through poetry. And I just remember being inspired by her works and feeling that I could find myself in a way that was beautiful and allowed me to show up and have a sense of pride in my personal appearance that I would not have had through other sources. So we had certainly great political leaders, but it was also nice to have a voice that was softer and more creative that helped to shape how we see ourselves.
Yeah, changing that interpersonal kind of value and self-worth, but that translates to any community, not just within the legislative leadership. Well, that's amazing. All right, so you in and of your own right are a leader among an African-American leader in the state across the board, not just of obviously the Black community, but of the legislative community. What unique perspectives or philosophies do you bring every day to your work that have that lens and that filter on it?
It's interesting because we presume a lot of times that because a cultural group may share a common heritage, that they all share the same perspective on how to best proceed to reach goals in the future. And I think that it's important for us as minorities, as much as it is important for us for people to hear and see what our perspectives are. I think it's important that we also show up as who we are individually, so that we don't assume that all African American females think that the best way to have economic parity and equality is this sort of policy, or all African Americans presume anything about how education policy should prevail. We show up as individuals as much as we show up as representatives of our cultural designations. So I think the unique perspective that I bring in my role as a leader is to remember to show up as who I am, and to remember to share my voice. And as much as my experiences may be common to many people who look like me, they're also common to people who don't. And so to be mindful of who I am individually, as well as who I am collectively as a part of my cultural designation or as a part of my gender.
Well, I'm going to thank you for that thoughtful answer. So I'm going to ask you a shill question, if you will, for the internet and television industry, but as it relates to ethnic diversity, lifestyle diversity, what's your takeaway from the internet and television industry as to how we promote gender and ethnic diversity?
I am grateful to have had the opportunity to work in the cable industry. I have not seen the sort of commitment that the cable industry has to diversity in any of the industries I worked in beforehand. And some of the things that are most prominent to me are things like the Women in Cable Telecommunications Organization. It's a global organization that supports the advancement of women and the retention of women in professional careers within the cable industry. That's an organization that's open to women and men who are cable industry employees.
Who is their chairman now?
The chairman of that fabulous organization is Marva Johnson.
Okay, wonderful.
But it is compelling because when I went to my very first Women in Cable and Telecommunications conference, I saw every major communications industry CEO at the table. It tells us that the industry from the top down is committed to making sure that women have an equal opportunity to excel in the industry. And its
sister organization is
the
NAMIC,
National Association for Multi-Ethnicity in Cable. And the NAMIC organization is equally as well supported by the industry, and it shares that same commonality in terms of its goal of making sure that ethnic minorities, as well as people who have gender diversity, are well represented in our industry, that we find opportunities to further their careers. So even at Charter, 43% of our workforce is diverse at Charter. We have diverse programming partners like TV1 and BET and Revolt. So I'm fortunate and grateful to be in an industry that's reflective of our country.
Democratic House Leader Representative Keone Magee of Miami says he found inspiration from a childhood mentor.
The one person I can say that stands out is Willie Spencer. Willie Spencer's nickname was Spike. He was my high school teacher's aide at the time. As you're aware, I was labeled with a condition called emotionally handicapped. And in each course, they would have a teacher aide there to assist the teachers. Well, Mr. Spencer, at that point, we called him Spike, decided to take an interest in me, and he helped me along the way in understanding and appreciating the education.
Okay, so well, that's great. An educational leader, it's a shocker. It's one of your biggest focuses as you've been maturing in the process here. So let's move on to a larger scale. So the folks that we get to talk to in this process always have a national figure, but Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. obviously is the one that's the figurehead. But so far, everyone's got somebody else. Who is your favorite kind of national historic figure that you look to for inspiration?
Well, and that's tough, not because I don't know. It's tough because there are just so many. Right. So I can honestly say I look to a person like President Barack Obama. He brings about a different aura, a different approach, but at the same time, he wants the same result that previous African-American leaders sought. So one of the things that he's always has taught us is to understand the word empathy. So when you're looking at a President Barack Obama in this world, you're looking at someone who understands and appreciates the word empathy. How would it make you feel? And so I can say, I took that directly from him, and I use that in every decision that I make, whether the decision is to get to the moon or whether the decision is to get to the nearest supermarket. The question becomes, how would it make you feel if A happens as opposed to B?
Yeah. So President Obama rises to the highest job in the land. What did that do for your perspective on what's possible in politics?
Well, we've always known anything is possible, but it's one thing to know when there's a difference between probable and possible. Anything is possible, but when you're talking about probable, you're looking at the percentages. And for President Barack Obama to get to where he is and where he was at the time, occupying the White House, you realize that it just simply no longer is possible, but it is probable that the chances of making it to that level is real. Yeah. It's no longer an imaginary thing that we've read about or we heard about or we fantasize about, but it's an actual reality that's waiting to happen.
Inspired you, your constituents, just everybody, inspired everybody across the nation. So.
And the voters turned out for it, and the voters believed in it, and hope was the ingredient of the day, and along with empathy, and voila, we have former President Barack Obama.
All right, well, certainly the president leaves a legacy, and you're not one to seek a legacy after knowing you for a while, but as a leading African American in the state, you're making your own brand within the Florida electoral process. What is your philosophy? What is your hope that you leave behind as a prominent, black leader in the state of Florida?
Well, there and the parameters I use, Brad, and it was just a great question. This is something I teach my own children, right? There are 4 questions that should be asked every day of every leader. And a leader is just simply not someone with a title, but a leader is someone who moves the ball forward. Someone who wakes up one morning to get to the next day, and the reality of it is, and have a reality that says, I did something that has benefited or that will benefit the society overall. So the first question I normally ask myself when I set up these parameters is, am I doing something right now to showcase my faith? The faith, the hope, the internal understanding to push me forward, to push this nation forward. The second question I ask myself is, what am I doing to assist this nation? Am I doing something to push this flag forward, to make sure that this flag forever stands as a beacon of hope for this great nation? And the third question I normally ask myself is, what am I doing for my family? Am I doing something that's going to be beneficial to the family, therefore they can continuously build on what I've already started? And the last thing, which should be the first thing in most situations, but for me, it is very important. What am I doing for the future? Am I making a decision now today that will benefit the future? And if the answer is yes, I'm going to do it. If the answer is yes to all of those questions, I'm going to do it. Whenever there's a no there, whenever there's something that says, if I do this today, will it cause me to end up on the front page of the newspaper and cause my family to have heartaches? When those questions are answered with the exception of the 4, when the last question is answered in an affirmative, I don't do it. But when the previous 4 that I talked about, faith, family, and flag, and future, once those are answered in the affirmative, I go full speed.
Well, I tell you what, you're always inspirational. You're always driven, regardless if it's left or right politics or advocacy. You're first and foremost that we see you in the Capitol is advocating for your constituents. So you inspire, beyond any ethnicity issues or anything like that. But in this Black History Month, thank you for your leadership, and we appreciate you, Leader.
And thank you for taking out the time to making sure that issues that we're talking about today, especially during the time of Black History Month, and making sure that they are elevated and making sure the discussion is there. So thank you very much, Brad.
Representative Byron Donalds of Naples joined us to share what Black History Month means to him.
Everything. I think it's, even growing up as a young kid, it was really understanding what the full history of Black people was and is in America. I think it's really a celebration of all of the success that we've had, a recognition of some of the hardship, and really, frankly, some of the tragedies and the things that have just been heinous in American history. But at the same time, understanding how far we've come as a community, still, the places that we're going to go.
Yeah. All right. Well, so was there one person as a child growing up, an African American, that you looked to that was in your everyday or in your family? Who was that person you looked to as you grew up as a mentor?
Well, actually, one of the people that was in my everyday was my childhood friend's late father. He would actually take us. He was a janitor. He was janitor at one of the public schools in our area, and he would take us into the gym, and we would play basketball and baseball and all this stuff. But then sometimes it would be him and the other guys that worked with him, and they would discuss, Black history. They would discuss where Black people are today in America, and looking at us as young kids, and really explaining to us where we could go if we were serious and focused on the things in front of us.
So what was his name?
Mr. Canton.
Mr. Canton.
Mr. Canton.
All right. Well, we'll say a prayer for Mr. Canton's family and be grateful that he had that influence on you. That's amazing. All right. So from Mr. Canton, we start looking at either history books or leaders of today or of your childhood that you look to nationally. Historical figures. Was there one that stood out? Obviously, Martin Luther King Jr. is the one that so many point to as the focus, but there were so many more people involved. Who was your go-to African-American leader that inspired you?
Harriet Tubman. I mean, listen, she was not afraid. She was not afraid to do what was right and what was necessary to lead people to safety, lead people to freedom. And so you're looking back at her, the challenges she faced in her life, really leading people through the Underground Railroad. It was something that was really impacted me, showed me that no matter what is going on, you can stand up and do the right thing and help people around you.
Yeah, what's amazing is in just the geography of Florida, how many of the run trails were here and how much that Underground Railroad played its role in helping people to freedom here in Florida. Have you seen any of those stories up close since you've been elected, like gotten a little closer to some of the subject matter since you've been in office?
I have not. It's one of the things that I want to do. You actually get an opportunity to do a lot of things when you're elected.
Right.
That's one of the things I definitely want to take advantage of. It's on my elected bucket list, if you will.
Yeah. All right. So you sit in a district in Naples, Florida. You're a conservative African American, which some in conservative politics wouldn't bat an eye at. Others would be, oh my gosh, let's really dig in. This guy should run for president. But when you think about your responsibility, you've always been focused on your constituents. What do you think your responsibilities are to your constituents and specifically to the Black community within your district?
I think it's to lead with policy and ideas. If you look at the history of the Black community, we actually have a divergence in political thought. But currently, it's predominantly Democrat thought or liberal thought, if you will. But I think that my responsibility is to show young Black children, show Black people in general, that you can have a different worldview when it comes to politics and still be effective for our community. That you can be a leader in America even though you don't prescribe to a liberal worldview, which I don't. And so sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's challenging, but you always have to come back to the principles and the ideas. It's never about people. It's about the ideas that propel not just the Black community, but all communities forward. And that's something that I lead with every day.
So let's talk about this month in particular or throughout the year. How do you bring together those two different opinions and divergent voices in your district? Do you host town halls or do you just do it one-on-one? What's the Byron Donalds method of being a consensus builder and a peacemaker?
It's kind of all of the above. I'll hold town halls. Sometimes they're contentious. There are times I'll do one-on-one meetings in my office with people who have a completely different political viewpoint on the issues of the day. But what I find is when you take time with them and you actually get away from the politics, you get away from the circus and the talking points, and you focus in on the ideas, you realize people are actually closer than we seem to be.
Welcome back to FiTV. We spoke with African American leaders from across the state who share their perspectives on the importance of Black History Month. Our next guest is Leader Senator Audrey Gibson of Jacksonville. She shares how she was inspired by the strength and audacity of Shirley Chisholm.
Unbossed, and she had the audacity years ago to run for president of the United States of America, and that really, really impressed me, her presence, the way she spoke. She was very tenacious. And
where was she from?
like that. There.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, we'll come back to that one. What else? I mean, was there one signature thing about Shirley that kind of spoke to you?
Well, it was just the way that she carried herself. She spoke honestly, with passion.
Yeah.
She didn't mince words, and she dressed really well as well.
It's always good, right?
Yeah, and so
Just
I was very much impressed by her growing up.
All right, so from Shirley to
your favorite African American leader, and you know, who else would you look to? You know, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is always, you know, kind of the banner, you know, carrier. But there's so many more. Who else would you say you look to or you were inspired by?
I think my other inspiration, historical figure, is actually A. Philip Randolph, who was actually from Crescent City, Florida, who organized the sleeping car porters. He said that the way of progress for African Americans was the common man, and then the working men and women would be the progress, not so much the elite class. And just thinking about what those sleeping car porters went through, what he went through, the things that they had to do at that particular time and endure, and that he had the unmitigated gall to organize them so that they could have better pay and better conditions as basically servants to individuals on a train, from making beds. And
what's amazing is you know, and it's not tongue in cheek, but audacity and unmitigated gall. The fact that somebody, you know, who just wanted to stand up for their fellow man, it was considered audacious and galling. I mean, that's just, you know, how far we've come to have, you know, just leaders across the board, you know, leading new charges today, but versus how it was back then.
Absolutely, and there are still challenges today, but and we have to have the unmitigated gall to address them.
Well, as a senator and a leader, you definitely bring audacity and unmitigated gall to many of the things you advocate for. What, you know, we talk to people about legacy, and so many public servants are like, that's not what I'm here for. But what's the message you would hope to convey to the next generation of the new Senator Gibsons coming up? You know, what would you want them to think when they think about Black History Month and kind of your role in leadership?
Well, you use the history to move people forward, to bring forward ideas. You have to know what did happen in the past. How did it impact individuals? How did it impact the state? How did it impact this country? And what can I do to increase positive impact or get rid of negative impact?
Sure. Well, certainly impact is a definite brand that you carry with your elected role in office, and we look forward to you joining us the next time on FiTV and bring us some more audacious and galling goals. And we're so grateful that you're a great friend and a partner. Will we see you at the Black Caucus Gala this year?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Well, we'll be there to cover folks and do more interviews. And thanks for coming on for Black History Month. Our final guest is Tramel Gomes, journalist and host of the Rotunda Podcast. He shares how he found inspiration upon immigrating to the United States.
I'm from Georgetown, Guyana, and when my family immigrated here, watching ABC World News Tonight and seeing Carol Simpson, I believe she was a reporter, then became an anchor at the time, one of the first Black anchors to carry a full-on presidential debate as well. So she was very inspiring, and to have someone that looks like me and be able to hold that national stage was quite inspiring for me, and someone that I had the pleasure of meeting through the National Association of Black Journalists.
Did she make you want to get into journalism when you saw, like, did you know at that young age that you were like, I want to do what she does?
I did not know at that age, and that's why representation matters. Like, you know, you didn't know that you could be in these spaces, these specific spaces of people doing great and fantastic things. So these organizations that are representative of Black individuals, African Americans, and showing ways that you can progress outside of limited views is very important.
Well, it's kind of neat because we're all kind of in that post-60s fight generation where we saw a lot of these people doing the first newscaster, the first, you know, et cetera. So that's really neat. Okay, so well, as a journalist, and we are here in Black History Month, so do you feel you bring a unique voice to the online media space as an African American?
Yes, representation matters. It's like the lens of which you're telling a story. You can tell it from different lenses, and for quite a long time, those who are the storytellers and going into communities of that are minority communities are telling their stories from their lens and not really bringing that understanding from those in those communities. So being the only or one of the few, very few, the Capitol Press Corps is very small, and just everyone sees me around as a black person in the Capitol Press Corps, telling those stories, making sure to look out to the Black Caucus and highlight those individuals there and bring those into the stream is very important.
Well, I think from that perspective on our shows, you bring both the different party perspectives, the ethnicity perspectives, and just general amazing journalistic perspectives. So we thank you for that. Okay, so who do you credit your success to? Is it a national figure, or was it somebody local that was your mentor growing up? Who do you point to and say, it was that lady or that man?
I bring it very close to home. I bring it back to my parents. Simple. As I immigrated from here, if it were not for them, I would not be in this seat right now. Be able to go to college, be among the first in my family to go to college, make it to the University of Florida, and be able to pursue my dreams of starting my own business and becoming an entrepreneur. Right. So if it were not for their sacrifices, very important sacrifices, they got divorced coming to this country, I would not be who I am today. Yeah. So it's very close, and of course there are other notables out there that are inspiring, but the family unit and those behind me, and when times are tough, you can still call mom and dad. Those are powerful forces. Well,
as and I know many people that they faced a different perspective as African Americans growing up here, or as Black or African Americans that emigrated here. What did you find different versus some of your peers of you may have grown up so young here that you didn't see a difference, but did you notice one being from French Guiana?
It's noticeable. Intra differences within the Black community, it's noticeable, but when it all comes down to discrimination and all of that stuff, we all look the same in someone else's eyes. So it's different and same at the same time. So it's interesting. Well, it's complex.
Yeah, complex. But I think within the media circles and within telling the story, your strength and courage is always reflected in your storytelling. And so we look forward to encouraging folks to continue to tune into the Rotunda Podcast and listen to your great insights on our show, of course. But Tramel, we thank you so very much for joining us on FiTV talking Black History Month.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you.
FiTV is proud to share these Black History Month interviews with you. For more on what we do, head over to our website, internetandtvfl.com, and follow us on Twitter at FLInternetTV. Thanks for watching.